everyone. I am so glad to see you all here, but I must admit that I'm very nervous. It's like I have an anxiety disorder or something. Before I start, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit. If you had to fit me into a clique, I'd definitely be an art nerd. I idolize Van Gogh, and I spend all my free time drawing and painting. My love for music is deep, and I play 3 different musical instruments. I also played on a volleyball team for over 6 years, and I love to get good grades. But my favorite part of life is hanging out with my 8 older siblings and my mom and dad, and playing with my nieces and nephews. Now I'm going to ask you guys to do something for me. If you or a loved one has suffered from depression or anxiety, please raise your hand. That's a lot of us. Now, if you hadn't had read my biography or come to this event today and you just saw me on the street, and even after getting to know a little bit about me, you probably would not guess that I suffer from anxiety and depression. There's a lot of us that suffer. Now, depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. It may cause the feeling that life isn't worth living. There is no physical surety in what causes depression, but there has been certain consistencies observed in the brains of the depressed. One consistency includes a comparatively small hippocampus. The hippocampus is a small part of the brain at the back, and it controls and is in charge of cortisol, the stress hormone. It also controls serotonin. Now, this inadequate size of the hippocampus produces less serotonin, and less serotonin results in feelings of sadness and lack of enjoyment in day-to-day life. And now another consistency observed is high amounts of cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and this causes depressed people to feel stressed easily. We often feel stressed to the point where getting out of bed seems impossible some days. Depression isn't a weakness, and it may require long-term treatment. Motivation sometimes is non-existent, and life may appear to be meaningless. Depression and all these factors that contribute to depression can and often leads to the suffering individual's death by suicide. 60% of those who have committed suicide have been reported to have suffered with a mood disorder related to depression, while 1 in 8 American teenagers suffers from depression in the United States. Estimated globally, 350 million of us from all ages and ethnicities suffer. This is a huge worldwide issue that is rarely talked about. Depression and anxiety are not things that should be ignored nor belittled, or are they things that should be embarrassed about or hidden. Currently, there are 4 known consistently efficacious strategies in dealing with anxiety and depression. I'm sure you've heard of them, and they go as follows: therapy, medication, exercise, and sleep. Therapy has been known to be effective in cases ranging from mild to severe. This is with the correct therapist, of course. The ADAA states that cognitive behavioral therapy works to replace unprotective and negative thought patterns with more realistic and useful ones. Therapy focuses on going through specific steps to overcome anxiety and depression. It involves facing one's fears as a pathway to recovery. Medications can also be useful. There's a popular saying that says, everything physiological is biological. This means that everything mental that goes on in our brains also has a physical cause. So our physical cause also has a physical treatment, and that comes in the form of medications. There are 2 different types of depression medications in the forms of SSRIs and SNRIs. SSRI stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, and it increases the amount of serotonin in the brain, therefore often providing a remedy to the feelings of helplessness and worthlessness. SNRIs also increase serotonin and norepinephrine. It is widely accepted that medications are effective in most cases. Exercise is a 3rd generic strategy in dealing with depression. M.K. McGovern, who specializes in brain research, states that physically active people recover from mild depression more quickly, and physical activity is related to good mental health as people age. Depression is related to low levels of serotonin and norepinephrine, while exercise increases these neurotransmitters by stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. This indicates exercise as a significant potential mood enhancer. Sleep is the fourth widely known and aid in dealing with depression. Its benefits are obvious. Sleep is a restorative state. However, when sleep is disrupted or inadequate, it can lead to tension, vigilance, irritability, and other mood-related symptoms. Having someone you know and love battle depression is sometimes hard. It sometimes feels as if there is no way to help. However, from an insider's perspective, I can tell you that it is the people in my life who have helped me overcome my struggles the most. There are many things that you can do to help, and there are things that you can do to not help. I think a relative of mine summed it up pretty well, what not to do. She said that one of the biggest struggles that I have with depression is that I just want someone to listen to me, but I know that they won't because one, they just want to fix it and move on. Two, they want me to be normal, and they won't listen. And three is they will encourage me to seek professional help when all I want is to be hugged by someone that I love. If you know someone who struggles from depression, sit down, listen to them, and get them their favorite treat. Often all we need is a hand to hold and a listening ear. There's a statistic that says that 98% of people think that those with mental illness are likely to attack and be more aggressive. This is part of the reason why we, as depressed and anxious people, struggle to open up for fear of being judged or having a stigma attached to us. The best things that you can do for us is to validate us, like tell us that you know that there's an issue, and to love and to listen. I was diagnosed with depressive and anxiety disorders at the end of my sophomore year in high school. As a 15-year-old, I didn't understand what was happening to me, and I didn't think my struggles were worth the effort to try and fix. After-school volleyball practices were frequently interrupted by what I didn't know were anxiety attacks. My grades began to slip because instead of attending classes, I would lock myself in a school bathroom stall and cry because I felt terrible. At this point in my life, I was miserable, and I was clueless to the fact that it was human relationships that would help me to get feeling better. One afternoon, I finally worked up the courage to attend my honors biology class. This quickly ended in me sobbing because I felt terrible and I didn't know why. Luckily, I had a gracious science teacher who had me come sit down in his office, and he talked to me and he listened. And after listening to my problems, he helped me to kind of realize that it may be depression that I was experiencing. After listening, he encouraged me to seek professional help, and he told me about the 4 ways to deal with depression. He then gave me some advice that has inspired me and driven me to seek help and seek a relative healthy mental state. He told me that I needed to talk. He told me that I needed to talk to my parents, and I really lucked out in that department because I do have some great parents, and talk to people who care about me, and we all have people who care about us genuinely and who love us and want us to succeed. And so after he told me that, it really clicked in my mind that I was important enough and that my problems were worth fixing. And I think a lot of us struggle with realizing that we are worth the effort and that we are worth fixing our problems. Unfortunately, at the beginning of my diagnosis, I still had trouble admitting to myself that I had a problem. And so when I would get home from school, I would continue to isolate myself because I didn't want others to see my pain, and I didn't want to admit that I had a problem. So one night, this is really a personal story, but one night I was feeling particularly low, and I got the idea that self-harm might distract from the mental torment that I was experiencing. I grabbed a pair of dull scissors from a cup on the shelf, and I began to create small incisions on my arm. Tears streamed down my face as the incisions got longer and deeper, and I just want to say, anyone considering self-harm, please do not. I've never felt more panicked and alone than in these moments. As the cuts got deeper and longer, I began to hyperventilate more heavily, and I sobbed, and that's when my big brother Joe walked in. Joe is 6'4" and of a more muscular build. At that moment, we did not have a great relationship, but when he walked in, he didn't say anything. He just came, and he picked me up, and he rocked me. He rocked me until I was able to breathe more normally, and I told him what I was experiencing as I bled and drooled and cried on him, and he just listened, and he held me close until I was able to calm down. This moment happened 2 years ago, but I will cherish it and remember it forever because it helped me to realize the powerful impact that human interaction has on mental well-being. It was his care that initially led me to want to get better. And sometimes I feel as though I owe him my life for that moment. I had definitely considered suicide and had even half attempted the act at that time. Sometimes I believe that we as a human race don't understand the power of human connection and the purpose that relationships gives to our lives. Nearly all web articles I find mention therapy, medication, exercise, and sleep under the section of dealing with depression. While these strategies work, health is more fully reached by a fifth fundamental aid, human connection. Dr. Matt Hertenstein, an experimental psychologist at DePauw University in Indiana, states that behaviors associated with close relationships, such as hand-holding and hugging, contribute to a lowering in the amounts of cortisol in the brain. Cortisol is a very hormone whose overproduction is speculated to cause depression. The same doctor discovered that having this friendly touch, just simply someone touching an arm and holding it, buffers the physiological consequences of this response. My fellow peers, isolating yourself from people who want to help you is simply not sensible. Do not let this insidious disease convince you that you deserve to be alone, that you are not worth the effort, or that life is not worth living. If you let it, depression will keep you from reaching your potential and from leading a happy life. When you are feeling down for no reason, do not be afraid to reach out. Know that you have potential and hope, and let the good people in your life convince you of that often. Developing close relationships alone is not what will heal you, but this fifth fundamental aid will help you to drive you to practice the first 4 other aids. Human connection is what will save you. Thank you.